All right, as we get started, just a couple things to tell you. First of all, I think I've told you I have a YouTube channel out there, but that said, YouTube is changing the way they're doing things. You know, Mr. Corrigan and I had a long talk about this yesterday, about how we are becoming a more politically correct world. In many ways, that's a wonderful thing. It really and truly is. But in many ways, it's like, oh my gosh. Because now you have to go out to YouTube and you have to let them know whether or not your content is appropriate for kids. All right? And so, fine, I said, well, it is because it's technically for college people, but it's appropriate for kids. They didn't like what I put down, so they refused it. And I put a bunch of stuff in. They have, now when you upload stuff to YouTube, they've got a new uploader, which they say is better, but it sucks. And they've got the old uploader, but whenever you go to use the old uploader, it brings up this form that says, why aren't you using the new uploader? And I have filled it out a dozen times already and put basically the same thing in every time, but they don't care. So a few times things have refused to upload. So I do have the stuff, and I'm trying to get it up there as soon as I possibly can. All right? That's the first thing. Second, so you know this. All right. We talked about appearance yesterday and the school's standards. Next week, Ms. Bruggeman, who you may or may not have met already, what is her title now? Dean of Academic Affairs. She is basically, she used to be centered, actually she started here teaching in the networking program. She was a student here, and she became a teacher in the networking program. Then she got an administrative position, and she's rose up the ranks. She's a great person. She's very, very talented. She and Jim Boyd, who's one of her counterparts from St. Louis, next week they're going to be coming to the St. Louis and Wentzville classrooms, all of them, walking through there looking for people who are out of compliance. All right? And basically what they said in here is during the first week, people are going to come in the first day. They won't know to not wear the rank and garb, etc. You'll tell them that, etc. So this is what they say. The most common offenses they have noted, non-rank and outer garments. It's funny. I came in here this morning. I don't know if you agree with this or not. It's down now, but it was 74. To me, it felt like it was 104 in here. It just felt really hot. So I turned it down a little bit, and in that room, it's usually 69. Just about there. But one of my students, Grace, just a terrific person. She wears a ski coat all the time. She tells me she's always freezing. All right, well, if they come in next week and she's got her ski coat on, they're going to complain. I have no problem with that. I mean, if we had a day, let's face it, we had a day 2 years ago, literally the heat broke down. Now, on that kind of day, it was about 55 in here. I'd expect you to wear your own coats. That's whether you had a Rankin one or not. That's okay. But other than that, again, and it's funny. I don't know if I told you guys this or not. I think Keegan may have heard this. But a couple of years ago, they put right in the student handbook, under no circumstances can you wear hoodies. Then the next day, they started selling Rankin hoodies. And it's like, okay. So it was already out of date by the time it was published. All right? Okay. So cargo pants, the idea is when you wear pants, they can't have like an extra pocket on them. They also can't have like those little rivets in there. And I told the students yesterday, maybe I told you guys this already. I've got a student who did it for 2 years. He wore pants that were out of compliance for 2 years. Honestly, I never noticed it because it had a little ribs there. Ms. Bruggeman noticed it last semester. So she walked in the classroom, said hi. It was my afternoon class. Walked up and down every row and then left. And I'm like, I must have done something wrong. She's checking up on me or whatever. So I saw her an hour later and I asked her what happened. She goes, one of your students was out of compliance for his hair, and Devin, because she knew Devin, was out of compliance for his pants. So I told him that. He immediately starts laughing really loud. And I said, what? He said, I'm graduating in three or 4 weeks. I've worn these pants every single day since I've been here. No one's ever said a word. And he said, well, what's going to happen now? I said, I told you. And he goes, well, what happens? I said, I suppose if Ms. Bruggeman sees you again, she might call you in her office. And he goes, that's okay, then we'll talk. He never changed. He wore them every day, and nobody ever said another word. So it's, and even Mr. Corrigan and I were talking, and it's like they're getting a little bit more lax in the stuff here. All right. I mean, it's like I do have a student in the afternoon. It looks like he very rarely combs his hair. Now, they might come in and say something to him. I don't have a clue. I don't see where any of you look like you have any kind of problem, but they might think you do. All right? So hair length, beard length, hair not conforming to the shape of the head, etc. So they will be coming in next week. They will be coming in, and just so you know, it will be unannounced. It's not like I can't tell you. It'll be Monday, so make sure that on Monday, and I've told a couple of you too. Let's say you walk in here and you are really cold, all right? And it's before class. You can wear any coat you want, but you are supposed to take it off after class starts if it's not raining, all right? Again, I've had people already tell me, well, I don't like that. It's okay that you don't like it. That's fine. But again, it's something we're all supposed to adhere to, okay? All right, so to my knowledge, everybody's got some version of this stop sign program. Am I correct? You're not turning this in, but just so you got some practice. Same thing with that initial program. And then we did the inches to centimeters, both console format and GUI format, correct? And then I think the hours, minutes, and seconds we looked at yesterday. Now, you might still be working on them. It's okay, but again, you don't have to turn them in. The idea behind you using these is they may provide some help when you take your first hands-on test next week. All right? Okay. So I guess that brings us to here, the last four. The Make Change Console and the Make Change GUI. So I'm going to do them, but just to change it around a little, let's do the GUI first. All right? And it doesn't matter which one we do first. All right? But just, like I said, so we've got Make Change GUI and Make Change Console. So I'm going to create a new project. And again, you may have already been working on this. Yours may look nothing like mine, which is totally okay. All right. So next. So this is going to be Make Change GUI. On the desktop, I'm going to, again, have the project name and the solution name be the same thing. I'm telling it to create it. I'm not going to draw it on the board like I have been. Why? Let's just do it, and you'll see it right away anyway. So again, let's move this over, put my stuff in here so I can, have some kind of a comfort level with what I'm working on here. All right. I like to be able to see everything on the screen. You may agree with that. You may not agree with that. But if you ask why I'm moving stuff around, that's why. All right. And let's do a few things I may have not remembered to do the other day, such as, first, let's change the name of the form. All right, so instead of Form 1, I'm going to call this Form Make Change GUI. Okay, not a great name, but it's fun. All right, and then down in the text, I'm just going to say this form shows different change, amounts for different dollar amounts. You can put anything you want there. It really and truly doesn't matter. All right? It's always kind of nice if you're creating something for someone to put something up there so they have an idea. You know what I'm saying? Now, what I used to do was I used to be unbelievably picky. Like here, you had to put down, let's assume we're on Chapter 6, and this is Program 3, okay? And it's a Make Change GUI. I would have had you say here, your name, dash, Chapter 6, Program 3, Make Change GUI. If you want to do that, that's totally fine. But then people weren't doing it, and they'd lose a point or two, and they'd get all miffed. And after a while, it really wasn't worth the headache that I had from people complaining. Okay? All right. So I've got that. Again, no big thing. So we've got quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies. Okay? Those are what are going to be output, are our total, each one of those. Okay? But just so I do something different, just to show you you can, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the buttons first. And again, you can make this stuff in any order that you would like. It really and truly doesn't matter. All right, so there's my buttons. You've already seen this kind of thing. But I'm going to come up here, and this again will be my button calculate. And again, the name will be, or the text rather, will be calculate. All right. Yeah, this is the make change GUI. The second one, the text on here will be clear. And the name of the button will be button clear. And finally, the third one will be button exit. And the text on there will be exit. Now, I do want you to know one thing. And that one thing that I want you to know, just this is kind of like for the future, for lack of better words, just so you know this, we will eventually get to the time where we create a menu up here. See this? And why is that important? Because some places don't like to use buttons like this. They just like menu options. Some places like buttons and no menu options. Some places like both. So when we get to that point, we'll do both, just so you can see them. And you'll be able to run stuff two different ways. Okay? Now, it's not a big thing, but I'm gonna lasso these. All right? I think our book says they call that select. But remember, when I take the left mouse button, hold down on it, and come here, see how they all changed? All right? I'm going to just make them a little chunkier and just a little bit wider. I don't have to do that, but I am doing that. And the other thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to come over and play with the font a little bit. I'm going to make it 12-point, bold, and I'm going to make it Arial. So boom. All right? Okay. Now, that did nothing to change the program. And I hope everybody realizes that. There's nothing magical that happened because I did that. All right? And it looks to me like these maybe probably will have to go down a little bit. All right. Now what I want to do is I want to create, I'm going to create what? Quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies. I'm going to create 4 labels, and actually 5 labels, and 5 text boxes. The first one is going to be the total amount of change. And then I'm going to have the total quarters, the total dimes, the total nickels, and the total pennies. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. And I'm going to start by creating just one label. You'll see why in a second. Just one. All right. And I'm going to create just one text box. All right, so I've got just one label and just one text box here. That's what I want. So I'm going to come up to the label. I'm not even going to worry about changing the name right now. All right. Notice I've changed the name. I've got here button calculate, button clear, and button exit. But I'm going to come over here to the label. I'm going to immediately go to the auto size, set it to false. And I'm going to make this bigger, and I'm going to make it wider. So it looks more like this. Everybody see this? So it's about this size. And I'm just eyeballing it. And it might be a good size, it might not be. I don't really care. And for something different, I'm going to color my labels here. All right, use a color I haven't used before. How about green? There we go. And I'm going to come in also, and I'm going to change the text that's in here. And I'm going to have it say total change input. Might not be the greatest thing, but that'll work. So total change input. And then finally, I'm going to come in, and like I did before, I'm going to change the font. I'm going to make it 12-point bold and Arial. All right. Now, again, does that look great? It looks okay. All right. I'm not saying it looks great. Not at all. But it looks okay. It looks like it might be a little bit too wide, so I'm going to make it a little bit more narrow like that. Then I'm going to come over to here, to this other one, to my text box, and I'm going to find the property that's called read only, and I'm going to double click on it. Why? Now I can change the size of this. All right. So I can make that a little bit wider. Okay. Is this exactly what I want? I don't know. It's not. It's not great. It's not bad. In fact, I'm sorry. It's not read-only that I want to change. My fault. We want read-only to be false. I want multi-line to be true. All right. Why? Now I can change the size of this. Everybody with me? I can make it bigger. I can make it wider. All right, so they're pretty much, would you agree they're pretty much at least the same width right now, these two? You may or may not know this, but if you look up on the screen here, if I want to make sure they're the same length too, look on the screen, I can click here, and it has a size. 131 and 34. Then I can click over here. It's got 106 and 32. So I can make it the same size. I can make it 34 and 131. And now, I don't know why, that always used to work, but now doing that, it resizes it. I guess that's not working anymore. This is some weird, quirky stuff they're putting into 2019 that has changed the way this had been working previously. I'm just going to leave it like that. All right. Why did I do that? Well, now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to grab just this one. And I'm going to copy it 4 times. Again, I'm eyeballing all of this. All right? Is it good? It is. I'm not saying it is good, but it is. There. That's not bad. I'm going to change all those in a minute. But I'm also going to copy each one of these. Okay? Now, it's pretty obvious here what we're doing, I think. I don't think there's any surprise to anyone right here what we're doing. But one thing you may or may not be aware of is most people are used to a certain amount of symmetry. In other words, they like things that look a certain way. You may not agree with that, and that's okay. All right? But I'm going to come in here now. I'm going to start changing the text here, and then I'm going to change the names. All right? This isn't perfect. Again, I'm trying to line all that up. I'm using my guidelines there, as you can see. That isn't bad. All right? Make this a little bit there. I like the way that looks. That's going to be my interface. So I'm going to, again, lasso every control that's here. All right? And as you see, they're all highlighted. I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm going to choose Lock Controls. Now I've locked my interface into place. All right? So I'm going to change all this. Instead of total change input, this one will be total quarters. This next one will be total dimes. The next one will be total nickels. And the last one, it looks like I left off the semicolon or the colon there. Trying to be consistent here. And the last one will be total pennies. All right. I still haven't even changed the names of these controls yet. I'll do that in a minute. And I'm looking at this. You know what? A couple things I don't like. So I'm going to highlight all of these. If you look on the screen, I'm going to unlock them. All right. And I'll move them closer. When they're locked, you can't move them. All right. And the other thing I want to do too is I'm going to grab all of those at once. I'm going to go down to text align, and I'm going to set it to center right. I like the way that looks. Now, again, you can make your argument and say, yeah, but I don't think it's really that professional looking. Okay. But I would just come back and say it's pretty good for somebody spending 5 minutes on it. All right? Okay. Again, I could move these buttons over. They may not exactly be the same. I'm just going to leave them the way they are. But the first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually change the names of all these. So instead of label 1, I'm going to call this label total change input. kind of a long name, but it's all right. This label will be called label total quarters. Don't put I've got colons on the end of these. Don't put that in the actual name of the control. Don't put a colon in there. It doesn't like special characters. This will be total dimes. This one will be total nickels. And the last one will be total pennies. All right, then I'm going to do the same thing to my text boxes. The first text box will be text box total change input. The second text box will be text box total orders. Next one, text box total dimes. The next one, text box total nickels. And the last one will be text box total pennies. Now, if you look up on the screen, please, I should have now changed the name of all my controls. I can always double check. If you look up here on the screen, right here where it's got the name of the one, there's a little down arrow here. I can check right there if I want to. It's also a way I can move around from control to control. It's kind of boxy. Most people don't like to use it, but you can. All right? So, I'm not writing any code yet, but I'm ready to at least start writing some. But let's do about 3 more things first. First of all, look on the screen, please. These fields, I want those to be read-only. Not the input, but all the other ones. So I just highlighted these 4 fields. Now I'm going over to read-only, and I'm going to make sure that's set to true. That makes them kind of an ugly gray. Some people like that, some people don't. Let's leave that. All right, let's leave that, but I'm going to change the background color for the actual form to a lighter shade of green. There. All right, so that's what I've got right now. Again, some people like these to remain gray because it kind of sends a subliminal signal that they are read-only. All right, it's a matter of personal taste. Okay, next thing that I want to do is I want to go set my tab order. So I'm going to do a view, and I'm going to go to tab order, and this is the order I want. I want that to be first, so that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's the order that I want. So, I just clicked view and then tab order. And then to make those numbers go away when you're done, you do another view and tab order. Boom. Okay, now that's done. What else do I want to do? Well, I want to set the Windows start position, so I'm clicking on my form here. Whoops, that was bad. I didn't want to do that, but that's okay. All right, so I clicked on my form, and I'm going to go to start position, and I'm going to reset that to center screen. All right, finally, I'm going to click on the form again, and for my accept button, I'm going to reset that to button calculate, and for my cancel button, I'm going to set that to button clear. All right, I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to run the program. It's right now, oh, that's okay. Right now it doesn't have any code, but it is totally functional. All right, and you'll notice I can't put anything I want in here, but I can't put anything in here or here or here or here because they're read-only. All right. I can't even get the focus on these because you can't with labels. I could have made these labels, these gray things. We could have made them labels. I just decided not to. All right. So one more thing that I want to do, and then we will write code because I just looked at it, and I'm going to highlight all of these. All right. And I'm going to go over to my font because I like to make stuff the same size. So I'm going to come over to the font. I'm going to make it 12-point bold Arial. And I'm going to tell the system that I want my text alignment to be in the center. Okay? Now I'm ready to write code. Okay? You've already seen this stuff. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to bring up, there's my calculate. there's my clear, and there's my exit. Now, I'm going to cheat a little because I don't want to waste your time watching me code. So here's the worksheets. I'm going to grab the one that we did yesterday, the hours, minutes, seconds console. I showed this before class. I was showing this to Angie, but I want to show this to everybody. So here is one of those hours, minutes, seconds console. If I double click on the folder, I'm not going to do this, but if I double click here, it'll start the project up and it'll start up Visual Studio. But I'm going to come here to the other folder that's got the same name, and I'm going to find the file that's called program.cs right here. I'm just going to open it with a text editor. There's my code. Okay? Now, it's not ever recommended that you work on a text editor and then save it and go back into Visual Studio. You actually can do it, but Microsoft recommends you don't do it. All right? But what I do want to do is I want to come in and I want to find the code, and now that I look at it, it's the wrong one. I brought up the wrong one. I wanted to bring up the GUI, and I brought up the console. So let me bring up the GUI. All right. In the GUI here, you look and you're like, well, what file is it? It should be the one called form1.cs. That should be the one with all my code in it. And when you look, there it is. Why did I do that? Because I want to steal all that code for exiting, so you don't have to watch me flounder as I try to do it again. So I'm just going to copy it. Now I'm going to close this. I'm going to go back to my program, and I'm just going to paste that in. All right. I know some students, they'll grab this code, put it just into a text file, okay, and then save it out to their desktop and then just call it exit.txt or something and then paste it in right away. So they've always got it and theirs always looks the same. So doing that, when I run this now, my exit button is functional. Okay, you can all see that. All right, I asked you this the other day, so again, I don't want to talk down to you. There are 6 things I want to have happen when I click clear. I want to clear this, clear this, clear this, clear this, clear this, and put the focus right there. Boom, that's it. All right, so that's what I'm going to do. When I click clear, I'm going to say text box total, and let's do the start with a total change input, dot text, dot text equals double quote. I'm feeling a little lazy this morning, so I'm going to just copy that 5 times, and I've got total change input. I'm going to change this one to total quarters, to total dimes, to total nickels, and to total pennies. And as I've told you before, depending on how anal you get about this stuff, you can, make them look like little soldiers if you want to, as far as being all lined up. It's totally fine. If you don't want to, don't do it. And finally, I'm going to go back to my text box, my total change dot focus. And that's everything for my clear. Does all that make sense? Any questions on that? Now, again, you may still be struggling a little bit and saying, I'm not going to ask him a question, but no, it doesn't totally make sense. Okay? I believe if it doesn't, it's total change input. If it doesn't totally make sense, that as we keep going along in the book, it'll make more and more sense. All right? I'm actually giving you some stuff that's in chapters 4, 5, and 6. Because most of the stuff in chapters 1, 2, and 3 are theory-oriented. I want to show you. All right? Now, I'm going to do another file, save all, and I'm going to run the program again. But the only thing I can actually change is this. And when I click clear, boom, it clears it, and it put my mouse there. So that looks good. I know my exit works because I tried it already. So the only thing left to do, all right, is my calculate. But before I do, see this? I clicked on the form, I double-clicked on the form so it would open up load. If you ever, and there may come occasion, you want something to be initialized before the program starts. Maybe what you want to do is you want to check the time of the day. Okay? And if it's between 6 a.m. and 12 or 11:59 a.m., you might want to have yours come up and say, "Good morning, Angie." And if it's between 12 and 5, "Good afternoon, Angie." You could actually do that in the form load and have it come up with a little message if that's what you wanted to do. Now, I did it accidentally. You all know this already, okay? But I've showed you this. I'm going to show it again. I'm going to click on this lightning bolt on the form, and it says there, notice, under form, make change GUI load. See that? So I'm going to highlight this because I don't want it anymore. And I'm going to hit delete. And now when I come back in here and I look at my code, that line of code is gone. Don't just highlight something and delete it in your code window. That does not remove it from the underlying files. What I showed you does remove it. All right? Okay. All right, so let's start writing some actual code here. I want to go back for just a second, and I want to change this back to that. Okay, so let's think about what we want to do. All right, first of all, we were told we want to be able to put in between 1 penny and $9.99. That makes sense? So I'm going to create constants for those. I'm going to call them min change and max change. Well, I don't like those names. Use your own. It's okay. Again, they should be somewhat reflective of what we're trying to do. If you think minimum change and maximum change are better than min change and max change, you should use those. All right? So I need those. Because I want to make this program a little bit more English looking, I'm going to have a constant called quarter value, and I'm going to set that equal to 0.25, not to 25, to 0.25. I'm going to have another constant called dime value that I'm going to set equal to 0.1, which is the same as 0.10. I'm going to have another value called nickel value, and I'm going to set that equal to 0.05, and another one called penny value that will be equal to 0.01. Do all those make sense? All right? And again, it pretty much is convention that I don't want to get into this right now because it might confuse you. This thing right here where it says for make change GUI, this is called a method. It's got the same name as my project does. This is called a constructor. Don't worry about it, okay? All right, we will talk about it much later in the semester. But right underneath that, I'm going to make these constants. So I'm going to create my global program constants. And I'm going to, the same ones I just told you. So I'm going to have here const double min change equals 0.01. So what I'm saying is the smallest amount I plan on letting the user input is a penny. Okay? Const double max change, and the largest that I'm going to let them put in is 9.99. Those are arbitrary values. If I decide later I want to let you put in up to $99.99, would you agree? All I have to do is add a 9 there. And the program is still going to work. All right? All right, so I've got those two. Then I'm going to have const double quarter, I'll just call it quarter val. All right? You can make it value if you want to. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to set that equal to 0.25. Const double dime val. Set that equal to 0.1. If I put a 0 here, it's okay. Doesn't matter. But 0.1 is the same as 0.10. Const double nickel val. Set that equal to 0.05. Const double penny val. And I'll set that equal to 0.01. Now, this is my question for you. Are there any of those constants that don't make sense as far as what they're doing, what their value is, etc.? All right? Again, it is an unwritten convention that what people do is they put their constants in uppercase. And believe it or not, it might not sound like a big thing. I had several students that are now second-year students. They just didn't want to do that. I don't know what the problem is, but they just didn't want to do it. Now, are you going to take off if, I hate questions like that. I remember when my daughter was old enough to understand things. My kids are all in their 20s now. But she asked me, she said, what if I don't do it? What are you going to do? And I thought, I'm going to smack you. No, but I don't hit my kids. But, she knew it was something she should do. I said, why do you even have to ask the question? And then I thought, it's because you're a little smart ass. Okay, but it doesn't matter. All right. So I'm going to come down into calculate, and I'll be able to use these. All right. But I'm going to make some more variables in here. Okay, these are going to be variables. Now, notice before I said create global program constants, and now I'm saying create local program variables. The difference between global and local is access. Global can be used anywhere in this program. It's known. All right? We'll talk much later in the semester about what these words here mean. Private right there, and you'll see public. And there's other ones you can use too. And in many ways, they mean what you think they would mean. All right? But I don't want to get into that stuff right now. But the point is, these are global program constants. They can be used throughout the program. These are local program variables. They're only known in between here and here. All right? So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create them. And those were all doubles. They all have a decimal point in there, right? These are all going to be integers. So, int, I'm going to call them num quarters, and I'm going to set that equal to 0. Int num dimes, whoops. I'm going to set that equal to 0. Int num nickels, I'm going to set that equal to 0. And int num pennies, and I'll set that equal to 0. All right? Now, before we go on, and we are going on right away, but before we do, I do want to make sure everybody does understand these values right there, those values, are going to hold what goes in these 4 text boxes. So again, in the example that I showed you, do I still have it up? Yeah, there it is. I did fix it, so it's right on here now. Hopefully, when we put $9.99, the first text box will have, or the one for quarters will have 39, the one for dimes will have a 2, the one for nickels will have a 1, and the one for pennies will have a 0. Does all that make sense? All right. So now, for lack of better words, I've kind of started mapping out everything that I'm going to do. Okay? But I need one more. I need one more variable in here. And I'm going to call this, now up here, we called it, we didn't have one. I'm just going to call it total change. All right, and I'm going to set that equal to what? 0.0 will give me an error. Why? Because I want that to be a double. All right, that thing that's right there, that's going to be what goes in here. Does all that make sense? All right. Yeah, that's fine. It's not all lined up. I don't really care anymore. You do know this. A couple of you have asked, but just so you know, I'm getting the green under here because I'm creating a variable but not yet using it in the program. Green means warning. Okay? I may have told you this. You guys may have heard it last semester, but I don't think you did. The first job I ever had as a professional programmer, I was told to go in and I had to grab this big thing of code. It was about 1,000 lines. And it had a bunch of errors in it. They wanted me to fix the errors. It wasn't working right. And it was a chance for me to learn how to use the language, because when I got hired at this company, I didn't know the language they used. All right, I had to literally go to college, and it was kind of cool because the local college, the teacher was one of their programmers, so he taught you the language the way they wanted it to be written. So it was kind of nice. All right, but well, let's just go on. I just want to get this done so we can do the other one. So the first thing I want to do here is this, as I mentioned, total change is going to be equal to, I'm sorry, I didn't want to run it. That is going to be equal to whatever amount I put into here. All right? So what I'm going to say is total change equals convert dot to double, all right, text box, total change input dot text. Now that's a little hard to read, and I can't really make this much smaller here. I'll try. Okay, but that's what that is. All right, and I'm hoping we put a number in there, and I'm hoping the number that's in there is in range. That makes sense? But it might not be. So I'm going to come in here and say if that total change is less than our minimum change, or our total change is greater than our maximum change, all right, then we know we've had bad input. Okay? So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to go down and put another one of these dialog boxes in there, and it'll be simpler than this one, so don't worry about it. I'll fix it all literally in a second. All right, I won't need this if. All right, it's going to be a simple dialog box, so it's only going to have an OK button on there. And it's an error, so I'm going to change it, not a warning, but I want it to be an error. All right, and I'll say change input must be between 0.01 and 9.99. Re-enter. Again, if you don't like that, put in whatever you want. And I'm going to put in here out of range input error. Okay? Again, if you don't like that, that's okay. And finally, I want to come in and I want to clear out whatever's in there. So I want to say this thing. I want to clear this out. Equals double quote, double quote. You saw this the other day. I want to set the focus to it. All right. And I want to get out. Now, I did that quickly, but let's run it so you can see it. Then we'll go back and look at the code. So now if I come in here and I put in something out of range, it says change input must be between 1 cent 1 and 999. Well, that's bigger. When I click OK, this should disappear and my cursor should be right there so I can run it again. Does all that make sense? All right. So again, if you want to look at this, fine. It sounds like people understand it. This is partial error handling. It's not total error handling, because if I either leave that text box blank or I put something non-numeric in it, my program goes to hell. It blows up. It gives me what's called an exception. We're going to handle that in about chapter 5 or 6. Then you won't have that happen anymore. Okay? So if I get down to here, I've got all this if. In fact, yeah, I want all that stuff. Let's see, if this, yeah, boom, boom, boom. I want all that stuff to be inside of my if statement. All right? Because I only want that to happen if my stuff was out of range. So if I get down to here, I put in a number, and that number is between 0.01 and 9.99. Whether you're copying this or not, I can make a copy. I don't care. But does all that make sense to everybody? That's what I care about. All right? Okay, So then I know I've got a valid value. Now, you could look at it and say, you know what? I don't like the way you set this up, Jeff. Really, what I should have done is for min change, this should be a 1. And for max change, this should be a 999. Do you understand that? Because it's how many, let's just say we did it in pennies. All right? It doesn't matter because we could change this around anyway. We wanted to change this around. Now, an advantage of doing it this way, just so you know, is first of all, I can make those ints. Okay? Is that an advantage? I don't know. But I'm just telling you, I could make that an int. I could make that an int. Okay? And then down here, I'm probably going to I might have an error now. Convert dot to double. No, it didn't change it, but I'd have to make that an int as well. Okay? And notice I'm not getting an error. So why did I even do that? All right? Well, it'll probably be easier when I start to do my calculations. All right? But let's say I didn't do it. I'm going to set it all back to the way it was. I didn't do it. So I'm going to make that back to a double. I'm going to put that, and I'm going to make all that back. And it's going to be a double and a double. Okay? Would you agree it's not all back the way it was? Well, then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take whatever value that was put in there, and I'm going to multiply it by 100 so it does become that value. Does that make sense? Okay? I don't want that to be 9.99. I want that to be 999. So I can divide it by 25 to find out how many quarters I have. Right now, if I leave it at 9.99 and I divide it by 25, it's going to be 0. That's wrong. So if I leave it like this, which is totally fine to do, then the next step I have right here, how that got changed, but it did. All right, so the next change, okay, that we have in here, after our if, move all that stuff over, that should be tabbed over, all right, is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, well, num quarters, num whatever, double total change. So I want to say total change, and I already said what it was. It's whatever was in that text box. So I want to show you a shortcut here. I want to say total change. Don't type this if you're following along. I want to say total change equals total change times 100. So in other words, if I put in there, if I put in this text box that you see right here, what I'm telling you is if in there I put in 707.34, all right, I want to change that to 734. Does that make sense? All right. Now, this may be very confusing to your user. I might have to put another message or put another label up here that says something like, please enter a value between 0.01 and 9.99, right? But I already have that. Because if they enter something on a range here, they're going to get that error message right away. So hopefully that'll be enough that they'll understand what's going on. Okay? All right. So I've now done that. I've got it like that. There's nothing wrong with that except there's a shortcut for doing this. If you look on the screen here, this, let me write it up here. Those two are exactly the same thing. This is a shortcut for this. In most programming languages, you know, I said this the other day, not a joke, I don't think it's funny. No one gets into programming because they like to type. All right? So you can see that you're saving some keystrokes doing it this way. Do you have to do it like that? When you are just learning this stuff, these two have heard this already, program for understanding. If you understand this right here, and this confuses you, then don't use that right now. But when you get on the job, that's the one you'll use. Okay? I'm going to just keep it in there like that. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to start figuring out I want to start figuring out my quarters. I'm going to do that first. So, what do we call that? Num quarters, I think? Yep, num quarters equals, somebody want to take a guess at what that is? I'll get you started. Whoops. Divided by what? 0.25. Didn't we make that quarter val? Okay. All right, we'll see what it doesn't like in a second. So, oh, I know what it is. It's total change, okay, divided by that, but what I want is I want just the integer portion. I want the whole number, but I'm dividing something that's a double divided by a double. See, that doesn't like it. So I can tell the system, yeah, I know, but what I want you to do, for lack of better words, in fact, I did it wrong, I'm sorry, is I want you to go, let's see, maybe you do want it the other way. I'm doing what's called casting. I'm telling the system, is it in 32? All right, I'm giving you the wrong syntax, not on purpose, but once I figure it out, all right, well, I'm going to go to my buddy, Mr. Google, and say how to cast to an int in C#. How to convert a string to a number, casting and type conversions. It's probably in here. This morning, I had a little extra time, and I thought to myself, I'm going to go in and just write these myself. Then I thought, well, if I do that, though, first of all, you don't even have any proof I did it. All right? And second of all, no, I like doing stuff like this because you see, you know, with this 60-some-year-old brain, I forget how to do things all the time. All right. So, yeah. It is like that. See that? Int? All right. So why doesn't it like that? There it is. Okay. Now I noticed that Chris just left. It's pretty close to 9. Let's take a break and let's come back at 10 after 9, please.